Hi, and welcome to Nature, Health and Wellbeing, a podcast by Conservation Volunteers Australia. This podcast examines the intersection between nature, human health and wellbeing, exploring how these are all interconnected and why it's important we take care of each of them. Episodes will feature a panel of experts discussing topics like climate burnout, how to connect with nature, and much more. Let's get started.
Welcome to the podcast on nature, wellbeing and Indigenous wisdom. My name is Kit Klein and I'm your host, and our guests today are Dr. Jenny Brockis and Mark Coolmartry. And I'll do a brief introduction of myself as the host. So I'm a social worker, a nature-based therapist and clinical supervisor. I've been working in the mental health and wellbeing space for over 20 years, specialising in addictions and Indigenous wisdom and Indigenous health. I'm a descendant of the Wampanoag people. I also have German heritage, Scottish and Irish, and I'm the founder of Nature-Based Therapy. Today we have Dr. Jenny Brockis, and she's a medical practitioner, best-selling author and expert in brain health and mental wellbeing. And we also have Mark Coolmartry. He's an Wurundjeri elder and cultural leader, advocate for First Nations perspectives, and is the founder of the successful tourism business, Cool Tours. So I might start with Jenny. Would you like to give a little bit of a brief introduction of yourself and the work that you do?
Thanks, Kit. So yes, I'm a medical practitioner. I used to work as a GP in Perth for many years, loved my work until I burned out. And after that time, I really wanted to sort of look at what I could be doing differently, not because I didn't love general practice, but because I've realized that the way we approach health and well-being has become very sort of polarized to fixing what's broken. We're always looking for the outcomes. We're not looking at what keeps people well. So I actually went into the health and well-being space in the workplace. And that's where I've been for the last 15 years, providing workshops and speaking at conferences and things. A lot of the focus has been on mental well-being. And for me, when I sort of joined lifestyle medicine and retrained as a lifestyle medicine physician, I suddenly realized that much of what I've been doing over the previous 15 years is actually part of what lifestyle medicine is all about, which is about asking what keeps people well. And this, to me, includes how we go about our daily lives, where we go, what we do. And the thing that I think has been missing in action is time outside, time with nature, time to really be in our environment at a much deeper level. So that's my focus these days.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And Mark, would you like to give a brief introduction of yourself and the work that you're doing?
Sure. Now, I'm Mark Coolmartry. As already mentioned, I'm the founder of a tour company in South Australia called Cool Tours. Now, we've just taken the name Cool from the first starting point of our last name in KOOL. Now, so I'm a Wurundjeri man, and where I'm at the moment coming from is on Kangaroo Island. And we believe Kangaroo Island is where life began. And our creator, Wurundjeri, came right across country, or Rui as we call it, and his final resting place is on Kangaroo Island, where when he entered what we call the Kalawinjiri, he entered that spirit world, and that gave us life, and that was the beginning of life, is what our people believe.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think it's, we weave spiritual well-being into mental well-being and emotional well-being, which is really important. And we'll talk more about this. How do we weave Indigenous wisdom into therapy and into well-being as well? So I'd just like my next question that I've got for you is, could you briefly share how your current work connects with the themes of nature, well-being and or Indigenous wisdom? So let's expand a little bit more. So Jenny, would you like to start on the themes of nature, well-being?
I didn't realize until a couple of years ago just how important time in nature had been for me personally. I think COVID highlighted the fact that when we're told we can't go outside, we actually feel dreadful. And, all the long lockdowns we had and times where we were given 1 hour to exercise outside and all that stuff really made me think, you know what, there's something about being outside that makes all the difference to how we feel emotionally, but how we are physically, emotionally, spiritually, and everything like that. So I started to look at the research, and the more I looked into the research, the more I thought, whoa, we are missing out on something that is incredibly important for our holistic health and well-being. So over the last couple of years, I've been doing more reading around the topic. I've done some training myself in nature therapy to understand it at a deeper level, and talking about it with people, either in the workplace or just generally, to remind us, because I think so many people say to me, Jenny, I get that it feels good being outside, but now we've got the science to explain why. And when people get that message, it's like, whoa, now I really do intend to start doing things a bit differently and get the kids outside more, because this applies obviously to every generation. It's not just for grown-ups. So my work now is more holistically focused on trying to improve people's level of interaction with their natural environment, and say, look, I know we're all busy, but start with just a few minutes and look for the opportunities, because they're there. It's just going from the thought of, well, that would be nice, to actually doing it.
Yeah, beautiful. And it is really about just starting and reconnecting. And I think this kind of leads into the work you're doing, Mark, that, Indigenous peoples have been living with nature and keeping life sustainable for thousands of years. Indigenous Australians is the longest living culture in the world. And I'm really curious, your work in Indigenous tourism and connecting people to country and inviting them out onto your country, how does that tie in with, well-being and nature connection?
So I've already mentioned around the importance of the cosmology. And one of the things that have occurred for our people is having a connection to place, or a connection to country, as people also call it. Now, when we're not able to have a connection to these special places of significance, it affects our mental health extremely badly. And one of the ways that our family has discovered is that through tourism, we can visit place, we can visit these sites of significance and also sacred sites through tourism, that has now been a door opener for us to be able to go on to country and care and share the importance of country. Now, without tourism, that hasn't been available unless we're able to create relationships with landholders. And so through tourism, though, we're able to work with landholders, whereas before we were just people wishing to go onto country. Now landholders are embracing the importance of tourism and sharing what needs to be done to be able to help our mental health. So it's a real game shifter.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a massive increase in well-being tourism, and people are seeking these well-being experiences through tourism. And it's a great way to connect to country and to, I guess, learn about country and the history of Indigenous peoples, and how Indigenous peoples are deeply connected to land and country, and how do we share those knowledges to enhance the well-being for other people as well?
Most definitely so. And that's what's happened through tourism.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Wonderful work that you're doing. Jenny, I want to talk a little bit more about your research and your practice. And what role does nature play in enhancing well-being and, in particular, brain health? So when we're looking at brain health, neuroplasticity, what impact does this have?
Well, probably as you'd expect, it has a profound positive effect on our ability to think and think clearly, to come up with more insight, to be more creative, all these type of things. You know, we use our brain for so much, but too often we're so stressed. And the particular issue, I think, is that modern life requires a lot of us to be spending a lot of time indoors in front of a screen. And techno stress, as it's called, has become recognized as an issue. Not only does it make us mentally tired, but it also diminishes our ability to think clearly, because as we get more fatigued, it's harder to stay focused and pay attention. It's harder to get your work done or even stay interested in what we're doing. And this is where understanding that we can regain that ability to think really well by literally stepping outside for a few minutes, I think is quite profound. Getting that sense of perspective, because otherwise we become very sort of narrow in our outlook. So we can overcome that cognitive fatigue by getting outside and just looking around us, just standing still and looking up at the clouds, the trees, if there's water around, listening to the birdsong, just immersing ourselves in natural sounds has been shown to be incredibly calming, but also clarifying. So we get lower blood pressure, lower levels of stress hormones, but we also get that increased sort of awareness of what's around us, which makes us actually better at noticing and listening when we're in conversation and doing other tasks with people indoors. So it's massive. So
Wonderful. That's beautiful. And that kind of leads on to my next question, which you've kind of covered, is what simple practices would you recommend for people to connect more deeply with nature, to be able to reduce stress and to gain that mental clarity that you're talking about? So being in nature and noticing, is there anything else, or can you expand on that for us?
Yeah, it's interesting. I sometimes get asked by people who say, well, Jenny, I like to go for a run. Can I run outside? Does that count if I'm out in nature? And I say, absolutely, it counts. But it's the quality of the interaction with nature that actually matters. So we can be outside, but if we're not paying attention to what's around us, we're missing out on a lot of the benefits. So my biggest message to people is take the things out of your ears. If you're somebody that likes to go out listening to music or podcasts or whatever, and you've got those little earbuds in your ears, to get the full immersion with nature, take them out so you can actually listen to the sounds, because all the research shows that if you're on the phone or listening to other things, you're not getting the same benefit. So that is probably my biggest benefit. If you want to do anything different, go outside, but put the phone onto silent, take the earbuds out, and just notice more, just for a couple of minutes.
Beautiful, thank you. And my next message or question for Mark, and I think this is something that's come up from your answer, Jenny, that nature-based therapy isn't something that's new. Although it's coming out into mental health care, that's new, it's innovative, and, there's evidence-based research. But as a First Nations Canadian person, and I think, Mark, yourself First Nations Australian, and looking at Indigenous wisdom, that nature therapy isn't new. It's something our ancestors have been practicing for thousands of years. And so when we look at Indigenous wisdom, how do we, integrate this, or how does it align with modern therapeutic practices like nature-based therapy? And, I think the challenge too is back prior to colonisation, we didn't have technology and we didn't have these distractions. in life. So it was much easier to be present. It was just way of life. It was life. And so how do we bring Indigenous wisdom into mainstream healthcare, knowing that we do have these distractions? Do you have any insight or recommendations on this?
The connection with nature is multi-leveled. Now, for our people, we have something called our miwi. Our miwi is almost like that gut feeling, but our miwi is our connection to self. Now, going to another level, everything within our environments or within these places of significance, there is something that we are attached to, whether or not it be a plant, a bird, a marine, whatever. There's everything that feels within our miwi that we are connected through to. Now, that is called our nyachi, or it's almost like a totem that we have this connection and a responsibility of looking after it. So even if we're not able to get outside physically, we can actually remember through what that place feels like and what's in it. So we can almost smell the water, feel the cold wind, smell that tree, smell that flower, that plant. We can almost hear it when you have a spiritual connection. So that's that whole, and it's that spiritual connection with an environment that you are already in tune with. Now, when you go out into nature, you are strengthened even more. And it's almost you're getting a top up. So when you go to that place that is of such importance, you actually get a refilling. So it is those times when you can't go physically to that place of significance that you are drawn then to in your mind, in that feeling. So that the mental strength that you get from actually feeling place, or in our case, feeling country, or that place that's of significance, or when you can't hear that bird that really lifts you spiritually or lifts you mentally. When you can't hear it, you can almost draw on by looking within. And so when you do go to that place, or you go and see that bird, that fish, that creature, the plant, whatever, the waterway, you're actually strengthened even more, and you're topping yourself up as if you're going on that journey. And when you're traveling, you may stop off and put fuel so that you can continue that journey. Now, this refilling is quite easy to happen about. However, you must be in touch with yourself and understand those feelings and understand what is that nyachi, what is that important thing that is important to you, that is telling you that is your responsibility to care for that as part of the holistic picture of everything within the planet.
Beautiful. I love that. And that really aligns with evidence-based research in nature-based therapy when we're looking at Edward O. Wilson and his biophilia hypothesis. And he looks at we are part of nature. We're not separate from the natural world. And so when we connect to nature, we're ultimately connecting back to ourselves. And it sounds like we're doing that through connecting to our senses, about being grounded in the body, connecting to it, the smell, the taste, the touch. And ultimately, it's going and connecting to our intuition, that gut feeling that you talk about. And that's our inner wisdom and an inner knowledge. And I guess my question is for people who are not Indigenous to this land, and if we want to incorporate this wisdom into well-being, is that possible?
Of course it's possible, because what happens is we believe that the Nyachi system is universal. We believe people may call it something different. They may call that miwi, that inner strength, something different. However, everybody can carry these tools. Now, so this is what we teach through tourism. We teach, we show people the environment, we get out to nature. Like my office is out in nature. I don't physically have a building that's my office. So my office is out in the water, the land, walking, talking, that is my office. And so when you're able to impart these knowledges to people, they also can be physically challenged. They can actually be visually challenged. They can be challenged in so many ways that once they're empowered and they understand the strength of their miwi, this is when they are fully strengthened into so many other these senses. So whatever that sense that might be diminished, the other senses take over. And so what happens is when they find that place in nature, that place that is of significance, that bird, the animal, whatever it be, when they find that, they are strengthened. And this is for everybody. This is something that we're able to teach everyone, regardless of where you're from, who you are. So right throughout the world, everyone has that place of significance that strengthens them, that uplifts them, that maybe they've been as a child and all through their life. Maybe they've taken their children, their grandchildren to these places. And then everyone's able to be fulfilled in that and be nurtured through being in place.
Beautiful. And I think when you're in that place, you just know, right? It's an inner knowing. It's a felt thing. It's not something you have to think about. It's felt. It's in your gut, and you just know what that place is. And I love that. And I guess that leads me on to the next question for you, Mark, is can you share an example of a particular place or practice in nature that holds deep cultural or personal significance for you?
Where I am right now on Kangaroo Island is a real strengthening. So what happens is you come across on the ferry, but when you're coming to the top of the hill at Cape Jervis and you look across and you see Kangaroo Island, there's a whole different feeling that comes across. It's like this wave of warmth that you get this feeling, and it's hard to describe unless you have this connection with Kangaroo Island. And that doesn't have to be an Indigenous person. Everybody who lives on Kangaroo Island has the same feeling. You're leaving behind this burden of the world, and you're getting onto this island of dreams. And so coming here is one of the places that strengthen. Now, for an Indigenous person or as a non-Indigenous person, as I'm saying, coming here to know that was the beginning of life. And to go to these very important sites of significance that are important to our creation stories, they are a real uplifting. So at the moment, I'm over here with my two little grandsons, their mum and my wife and son, and my little grandkids have never been here. So for the next 3 or 4 days, we're taking them around the island and showing them places as they're beginning to learn. They're only 4 and 6. So they're starting now of learning these places. And then they will get this strengthening by understanding what we call Rui. Rui is our word for land and environment and place.
I love that. And then it's passed down through generational knowledge as well. And that's keeping that knowledge alive and passing it down and then furthering that connection. And then inviting other people to do the same through your tours as well. Jenny, how do you think Indigenous perspectives on connection to land can complement modern approaches to health and wellbeing, and especially, I guess, tied into your work on brain health, especially with what Mark's been talking about?
I think there is so much that everybody can gain from a better understanding about the Indigenous connection to country. And the best way to experience that is by actually going on country yourself, and preferably with somebody like Mark, who can explain how it works from the Indigenous perspective, because I think many people who are not Indigenous do get that sense of, whoa, there's something special about this particular place, but they can't sort of articulate or identify what it is. So I think having the conversations with people, and Mark's work with tourism is actually critical to our better understanding. And certainly I've been fortunate enough over the years to spend, because I'm based in West Australia, and we have this most magnificent country that it goes on and on and on and on, to get out into that space. And it's like Mark described, it's that top up. If we disappear for a couple of weeks into the desert and just sort of stay there for a while, living off the land and just being, we come back replenished, feeling different. And it gives us a better perspective of, the world's issues and stuff. And I think when as a physician, if I'm issuing somebody with a nature prescription, which is what we call them, because people love prescriptions. You go to your doctor, you expect a prescription, right? So you can just say, look, a nature prescription is the invitation, because not everybody loves nature. Some people go, ew, it's dirty, or it's got bugs, or blah, 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 blah. So it's an invitation to explore. And if people are really sort of, oh, I'm not so sure about that, you can do it in different ways to sort of introduce them more slowly. But to physically get somebody outside is the best. But of course, you can use other methodology as well. I mean, by bringing nature in, and many people have plants and images in their houses and offices, and even virtual reality, where you're looking at nature. I mean, my dentist has been playing the same David Attenborough Blue Planet images, on the television screen above the dental chair for I don't know how many years, but I always watch it because we're drawn to those type of images. And I think there's so many ways we can enhance our access to nature prescriptions. And, just to get started by standing on the grass in bare feet, something that's simple as that.
I love that. And you've actually answered my next question, which was if someone wanted to start integrating nature into their self-care routine today, what would be your suggestions? And, you had different suggestions, prescribing nature, just going out to nature. Doesn't have to mean going out bush. People have negative experiences in nature, bad camping trip. If someone might have been lost in the forest when they were younger, or when we want to connect people to nature, it has to be a safe place. And we're not assuming that everyone has had a safe experience being in the natural world, because we know from climate change and natural disasters that nature can actually be scary, bushfires, especially here in Australia. So I think it's introducing nature small, like you're saying, those small steps. It's even bringing nature in, like you've recommended. Self-care can be bringing a plant in and just watering the plant every day, or tending to the plant is self-care for yourself, but it's also care for the plant. Or playing audio or visual sounds on YouTube, on Nature Sounds. You can access YouTube on nature as well. You can play nature in the background, or on Spotify, there's nature sounds. So we can use technology to connect with nature if we can't always get out. Let's look at ways to bring nature in, which is what you've discussed, and we can integrate that into self-care as well. Mark, I want to ask you a question about community leaders and organisations, and looking at ecological health and mental health, and bringing Indigenous wisdom into how organisations look at mental health care as well. Have you had any experience with that, or do you have any insight or recommendations of how organisations can bring more Indigenous knowledges and nature connection into work and into place?
A great story that I was told on one of my tours one day, when I was explaining about the Nyachi system. This lady began to cry, and I said, I'm sorry, did I do something wrong? And she said, no, my mum is in an aged care facility, and we've been thinking that she was really losing her mind, and she was struggling because my dad had passed on. She now is in this aged care facility, and she's been talking to the magpies at the end of the day, she's feeding them and she's talking to this magpie as if it's my dad. And so even the staff within the aged care facility was looking at this lady, talking to this magpie as if it was her husband who had passed on. But what I clarified is that that may have been her husband visiting, but it's her way of coping. So obviously what was happening, she was feeding the magpie and talking about her day and then asking the magpie, how was your day? And so she's having these conversations like she had done with her husband for 40, 50, 60 years. And it clarified for the daughter that what was really going on was her mum's connection with the magpie as a Nyachi, and her mum's connection with where her and her husband had been seeing magpies and doing exactly the same thing. So for the mother, she was being strengthened. She wasn't actually being weakened. And I think that's one of the things within organizations is that we must look more broadly. And life within an organization isn't just structure. It is actually this connection with the environment, connection with nature that can be really powerful when people understand it. And, Jenny is talking about those things around, going to places, whether or not it's in the desert or whether or not it's in the waters or wherever it might be. It might be this place that is really important. And I think within organizations, it's something that good leadership can demonstrate that there is this time when people might just want to sit and smell the air. They might want to be able to just to sit or walk outside and then just be that top up. So you don't have to go to places. Sometimes you only got to walk outside the office building to get the same feeling, you're recharged and you're ready to go again.
Absolutely. I love that. And I think there's a lot when we look at biophilic design and especially I think over in Europe, they tend to be the leaders in biophilic design in bringing nature into hospital settings, healthcare settings. Really, if we're creating new healthcare organizations, are they built with environment in mind? And weaving nature into that environment. And you're absolutely right, Mark. It's just stepping outside. A lot of the work I do in nature-based therapy, and when I prescribe nature to the clients I work with, it's, front yard, backyard, even a balcony if you live in an apartment, witnessing the clouds, listening to the birds, growing some plants on your balcony, that, breathing in the air. And just being present, that nature is everywhere and it's in us and it's all around us. And I think it's just rebuilding that relationship and tuning into that gut feeling and having that sense of place and belonging as well. So thank you. That's really, really, really important. And I think it's, for the listeners of this podcast, getting some sort of idea of how they can bring nature connection into their life and ways in which they can do that without feeling like they have to go to nature. Because often when I prescribe nature, sometimes it's I don't have transport or it's too far or I don't want to go on my own. But we need to kind of look at, well, where is nature? Nature's in us. It's all around us. And it can be incorporated into home and organizations and our own practices as well. So just to kind of finish up with a final question, Jenny, what's one insight about nature and wellbeing that you hope listeners take away from today's conversation?
There's so many messages. But I think it's exactly what you've just been talking about. It's that sense of connection to the world around us because we are part of nature. We're not separate. It's just that for whatever reason, many of us have separated ourselves and see it as something out there, whereas we've just got to get used to the idea, well, actually, no, it's us. We are part. And how we interact with nature will support nature too. The more we connect and understand ourselves and the role we play with the world around us, then it's a win-win, because we're the guardians for looking after nature more effectively, and nature is looking after us too. So I think that's probably one of the principal messages. And to know that, everybody can have access. You don't need to travel on a bus or anything. You can enjoy nature inside if that's no other way for you. And just remember also that nature is sometimes on our plate. The food we eat, it's all part of nature. It's the animals we have around us, whether it's a pet like a cat or a dog, they are part of our world and nature as well. And our interactions with them also are really significant in helping to support our health and well-being. So nature has many different forms, and we can embrace all of them.
Beautiful. I love that. Yes. We forget that our food should come from nature. And it comes from the earth, and it's here to supply us with the nutrients we need for good mental well-being, not just mental well-being, but I think emotional, physical, spiritual, environmental. It's quite holistic, that a place that nutrients and nature place for us. So, Mark, I just want to ask, what's one piece of wisdom from culture that you'd like to share with the audience as a key takeaway for them?
I suppose, like I've been talking about, finding this place that is important to you. Now, whatever that place is that strengthens you, when we all do our role, and then our role, whatever that might be, of caring for a plant, a waterway, caring for a bird, caring for something, somebody else is doing their role that's going to support your own nyachi. So somebody might be growing a tree that what happens is that bird is going to need. Now, we're just talking about food security. So, when we look at everyone's role, and our role is just minute, it doesn't have to be this massive thing of caring for the environment. But what it is important is we must care for at least one thing. The really big take home for me is for people to find that. Now, what happens in my tours, I'm able to clarify with people by teaching Indigenous knowledges. And what happens then, there's a lot of take homes for people, that then they start thinking that, hey, I'm actually doing a great job and I'm not aware of that. So I think it's just understanding from within, and what are you actually doing already? And then how can you find nature if you can't physically get to that place? What can you do? When you do go there, really immerse yourself in that place. So when you return, that all you have to do is walk outside of your office, and automatically you're topped up by your connection to one place. And so I think that's the important, is to understand yourself and understanding what strengthens you. And then obviously understanding what weakens you. And if it is not being able to go to that place again to get a top up, well, maybe it is time that you put that first and you go to that place, get that top up so you're able to keep going.
Beautiful. I love that. Thank you so much, Jenny and Mark, for your time today. What I feel, the listeners have really got out of this podcast is the importance of connection to nature, and knowing that we all have that ability to tune into that inner wisdom, and tune into our biophilia, that we are nature. We're not separate from the natural world. And I think the key message is that we all have a responsibility to care for country, to care for land, and to develop that relationship as well. And that we can use nature and work with nature as a modality, as a self-care strategy to reduce stress in our lives, to be able to connect further to country, and to have a place and a sense of connection and belonging as well, that will improve our mental health, emotional health, our physical health, and also our spiritual health. And I guess the question I pose to the people listening to this podcast is, how can you strengthen your connection to nature? You know, where is it that is your special place? What is it, one thing that you can do in your life, in your day-to-day living, whether it's when you get up in the morning, in your lunch break, before you go to bed, just having that moment to connect with your senses, connect in the body, and to just develop that awareness and connection with the natural world. So thank you everyone for listening. And again, thank you, Jenny and Mark, for sharing your wisdom here today.
Thanks for listening to Nature, Health and Wellbeing. Visit conservationvolunteers.com.au for more information or download the CVA app.